Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee. To open our meeting, can I please ask our Chair of Ngāti Kahungunu, Iwi Baden-Barber, to open us with a karakia.
Tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou tēnei huinga mō Sedum i tēnei rā. E mihi ana ki ngā mayors katoa. Tēnā koe hene wai. Te hemana o te kainehira a takiwā o te mata Māui. O tira ngā rangatira katoa. Mai koutou mā, tēnā tātou. Kua hara mai ki tēnei o ngā huinga. Nō reira, māku te karakia, te ino kia pai ai tā tātane nohonga tai. Nō reira e te atua ka harawa tēnei mātou mihi nei ki a koe, te tīmatatanga o tēnei huinga. Ki te kōrero nei tēnei kaupapa nui whakahirahira. Hei tāwharau nei te rohe ngā whānui o Ngāti Kahungunu. Nō reira e pā, chakina mai a mātou, nā mea noho mai nei ki te tepu, kia pai ai wā tātou nei mahi. Hei arataki nei e nei mahi mō Civil Defence i tēnei rohinga. Nō reire e pā, whakatōkia mai tō wairua tapu ki tēnā o tātou. O tira ki ngā whānau e noho i raro i te pēhitanga o tēnei huripari, Gabriel, i ngā marama ko tāke nei. Hoeno, whakaro nui atu ana kia rātou mā. Nō reire tēnei te mātou ino kia koe. Kia tuwhera pai ai tēnei huinga I runga I te ingoa tapu o ihi karaiti tō mātou kai whakaora. Āmene. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe te rangatira. A special welcome to you all, to the mayors, our CEs, our group management, also Savili, who is online on behalf of NEMA. Kia ora. And our manuhiri, tēnā koutou katoa. We'll hear from Richard Gedham and some from the Waimarama community. We have Ocean Beach representatives here, tēnā koutou. Mike Paku, our chair of our Māori committee, tēnā koe. So thank you all for being here this afternoon. Now to set off, do we have any apologies? Leanne, no apologies?
Mia Wise.
Mia Wise is absent, but Nigel Simpson will be in her place. Thank you. There are no others. Housekeeping. So in terms of a earthquake, drop, cover and hold, and head up to Tiffin Park, up to the Napier Hill. If there is a fire, we will exit the building and meet on the grassy area at Dalton Street, and then the wharepaku are just down the hallway to your right. We will be live streaming as well, so those out in the public can view today's meeting. Any notices? None. Any conflict of interest declarations? There are none.
Yep. Just as a member of the Cyclone Gabriel Task Force, National Task Force. I'm a member. So just note that.
Thank you, Baden. Confirmation of minutes from the last meeting on the 28th of April. Are there any additions? Any edits to be made? Mayor Hazelhurst?
Happy to move.
Happy to move. And second, Mayor Walker. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora tātou. Now we have Richard Gedham coming up to present to us around the Waimarama Community Resilience and Leadership activities. So we welcome you, Richard. Would you like to come up to the front?
Sure.
Kia ora.
Oh, come on. Start the front here, Richard.
And Mayor Hazelhurst, would you like to just talk to in a few minutes the relationship that you've had with this community?
Kia ora tātou, and very warm welcome to Richard. And Richard has been part of our community civil defence for many years in Waimarama. And when the changes to FENZ took place 7 years ago, there was obviously a different model where our communities weren't invited to play such a strong part in the new legislation. But that didn't stop Richard and his team of great community people who just got stuck in and made sure that the isolated community of Waimarama, who experienced a very, very big flood in 2011, were able to stand up and support the community before any emergency management services could reach Waimarama. So just want to acknowledge the amazing work Richard and the team do. And I know that there is a little bit of funding that comes from CEDAM to help out, but largely it's Richard and his team getting on and making sure the community's safe. So very warm welcome.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Richard.
Sit or stand?
It's up to you.
All right. Oh, I don't mind
What you feel
standing.
comfortable with.
Well, as I've been introduced, my name's Richard Gaddam, and some of you will know me as being spokesperson for the Save the
He's my
Plains
neighbour.
group.
He's my neighbour. It's not a conflict of interest.
Very proud to be his neighbour. And I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to present this presentation at this Hawke's Bay CEDAM Group Joint Committee meeting. Please forgive me if I go over my allotted time. As you can imagine, I've got a lot to say, as I normally have. Haven't I, Simon?
Yes. We love you, Richard.
Well, I'm actually here to advocate for all the people in our Hawke's Bay region, both urban and rural. I'm born and bred in Hawke's Bay. Farming's been my background, and I've been living in Waimarama since 1998. And when I first went there, I immediately joined the Fire Brigade as a volunteer. I'm now the oldest member there, which I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. In April 2011, as Sandra said, Waimarama experienced a catastrophic flood event where we had over 700 mils in 36 hours. Our road access was impassable for almost a week. We had no power, no communications for about 7 days. Water infrastructure fortunately remained intact. And I've been the civil defence leader at Waimarama ever since that event. This was a huge wake-up call for us as a community, so we decided to get proactive. We did a lot of fundraising within the community, and with the help of some wonderful donors, we built a purpose civil defence shed. We were also able to purchase a 4-wheel drive double cab vehicle, plus a purpose-built covered trailer, and equip it with welfare equipment. We also purchased a generator big enough to power the fire station and the civil defence building. We did our best to prepare ourselves for the next major event, whether it be another flood, an earthquake, or our biggest threat to our community, which is a near-source tsunami. Our static population at Waimarama is about 400 people. However, during the summer months between Labour and Easter, our local communities, batch owners, and an influx of swelling visitors, we can reach numbers as high as 5,000 people. As a major tsunami event can happen at any time, day or night, I created 4 escape routes within our community so that we can cope with as many people as possible to reach high ground within minutes and be safe. I've done extensive educational programs to inform our community, to alert them of the warning signs of such an event, what to have at the ready, and where to go to reach assembly points at a moment's notice. This has been done through public meetings, flyer drop-offs to households, and through Facebook. Up until 2014, civil defence was under the umbrella of the Hastings District Council. We had a great relationship with the civil defence people within the Hastings Council, and they were enormously helpful to us. One of the great initiatives we created together was to set up community civil defence groups throughout the region. There were about 12 to 15 of these community civil defence groups, and every month we as leaders would get together to discuss all aspects of civil defence. Who in our communities are best to lead civil defence in the event of a disastrous natural event? How can we be effective as a civil defence structure within our own communities? How we can deal with issues such as welfare, keeping people safe, creating points of contact to our communities and to a central civil defence structure, equipping ourselves for any natural event and assisting and helping each other as a group. This was a fantastic regional structure that had incredible people who gave up their time for their own communities. Their unselfish efforts were really commendable and just demonstrated their ability to want to care for their families, friends and neighbours in times of need. Civil Defence then moved to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. This was devastating for civil defence in the region. The whole culture of civil defence changed. The closeness with a new personnel structure was extinguished. After 2011 flood, we were given a sat phone that was taken away. All the community-based civil defence group structures were dismantled. Such a tragedy. All disappeared except Waimarama. I refused to disappear, and we as a community held onto our civil defence identity and to continue to grow our own resilience. See, a civil defence member came to visit us and wanted to take away our civil defence four-wheel drive vehicle for use in Napier. He also wanted to take away our Stinger. As well as this, he also wanted to take down all our civil defence insignia. One can imagine my response to this individual, who was never allowed to return to Waimarama. Since then, our relationship with civil defence has been strained. From our point of view, this has been a huge step backwards. Civil defence means the protection of the ordinary lives of people against danger or harm. We should be working together as a region to uphold the ethos of civil defence, not pulling against each other. So what we have ended up with over the last 10 years is a fragmented civil defence structure that was bound to fail and sadly set up to fail. This was proved to be true with the last Cyclone Gabriel. To expect a skeleton crew from civil defence personnel to cope with such a catastrophic event over the whole of Hawke's Bay region was an impossible task and proved to be so. I'm not attributing blame to the small group for the failings we know occurred during the cyclone. They did their best under the circumstances. Sadly, however, the people of Hawke's Bay lost confidence in the Hawke's Bay CDM to deliver the best outcomes for them. They deserved and still do deserve better. If there is blame to be had, it is for those responsible for removing the community structures we had before they were tragically taken down. The biggest issue we had during the cyclone was the breakdown of any sort of communication with people in our region. Communities couldn't communicate with each other, nor could they communicate with the Central Civil Defence Centre in Hastings. This has proved to be the biggest failure or breakdown with this event through our existing communication structures. Sadly, it was not a top priority within the existing civil defence structure. This was highlighted in an RNZ report on the 22nd of June, 4 days ago. The conclusion of this report is moves being made already to improve resilience include more satellite connectivity for cell phones if mobile rail networks break down, but power cuts took out this backup too. Extending roaming beyond 1-1 calls only, storing generators in high-risk locations. We have a lot of generators. There is now a question about where to store them and how to keep them maintained. As you know, I have been pushing hard for the reinstatement of community-based civil defence groups throughout our Hawke's Bay region. Communication devices are a top priority to distribute to these community-based civil defence groups. These include satellite communication devices and backup devices such as VHF radios. Funding is required and essential to make these community-based civil defence groups resilient, for them to be able to stand on their own feet and protect their own communities. The reinstatement of community-based civil defence groups throughout our Hawke's Bay region. I understand that Sandra Hazelhurst has initiated a start to this initiative by engaging Trevor Mitchell to make contact with communities to begin the process of setting up individual community civil defence groups throughout our region. This is a great start, Sandra, and you need to be commended for this initiative. Communication devices are a top priority to distribute to these community-based civil defence groups. This really is a top priority and should not be trivialised. If we can't communicate with each other in a central-based civil defence command centre, we are all lost. We can't assess people's welfare and the damage done to infrastructure such as roading, bridges, water accessibility and communications. We can't assess what the needs are of communities affected by a devastating natural event. This is critical not only to save lives, but to get the right needs to the right places and to the right people. If there is a sudden medical emergency in a community, we can't call for immediate assistance. This has been my biggest fear in any event. It happened during the 2011 flood. We had a pregnant woman who was in labour and was having serious complications. We managed to go overland through flooded areas and over slips in a four-wheeler to get to high ground and signal for help. The helicopter fortunately arrived. It also happened during the cyclone event. I had an individual that was having a heart attack. After acquiring a VHF radio, I managed to get a signal out by driving to a high place to reach help. I've been asking for the reinstatement of satellite communication technology, but to date, sadly, it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. Funding is required and essential to make these community-based civil defence groups resilient, for them to be able to stand on their own feet and protect their communities. None of the above can be done without funding for communities. There is funding out there from many sources. Red Cross. This seems to be difficult, as yet sadly they won't release the funding they have. The MPI, we are in the process of applying for funding through this source. Not sure how successful it will be. TPK has released some funding to certain groups, mainly Māori affected groups, which is good. The Evergreen Foundation Cyclone Relief Fund. Hawke's Bay Regional Council. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council collect rates from ratepayers for civil defence. This may be in the order of $3 million a year. We believe this money, or part of, should be redirected back to communities to assist with their own resilience plans and programs. It is possible there are other avenues of funding which I'm not aware of. The other issue is that we have communities applying for funding from multiple funders. It is my opinion that these funders need to work together through a single agency so that communities are A, not getting more than they need, and B, they're preventing, and it'll be preventing some communities from getting any funding due to funds running out through oversubscription from other funding applications. We as community groups have been asked to present what we require to keep our communities resilient over these winter months and beyond. We have done that, but we are halfway through our winter and still nothing has been done. Winter will be over before we even get started on this project. We have just experienced another weather event over the last few days. Fortunately, not as serious as Gabrielle, but if we do find ourselves once again having to cope with the possibility of another serious natural catastrophe, whether it be cyclone or an earthquake or a massive earthquake that will trigger a near source tsunami, which could happen at any time, we will once again be caught with our pants down. We need action now. While on the subject of tsunami, I'm not here to scare anybody in our region, but I don't believe we as a region are taking the possibility of a near-source tsunami seriously enough. Or are we just hoping that it won't happen under our watch? This event is not a case of if it'll happen, it's a case of when. And it is most definitely going to happen. And the consequences of such an event will be catastrophic, and the loss of life will be massive. It might not happen in our lifetime, but it could hit us within the next 5 minutes. And we are now totally unprepared for such an event. Communities, especially coastal communities, need a serious plan and to act on it now. Waimarama has a serious plan, and Ocean Beach is developing a great plan. They just need financial help to complete. But sadly, I believe we are the only communities thinking about the possibilities of such an explosive event. We as a region need to make fast progress on planning for this worst-case scenario. Not next month, not next year, but now. Now. Waiting till after the event has happened is just not good enough. It'll be too late. This group of regional leaders need to shortcut all the bureaucracy involved in this process and just get on with A, taking bold steps to make our communities more resilient and safe, and take immediate action on planning for our worst case threat from the ocean. The solutions are not complicated. They don't need consultants. They don't need red tape. The solutions don't need to be made difficult. They just need good old common sense from individuals that will just get the job done quickly and efficiently. This should not be a complicated business. I believe it can be done, and it most definitely needs to be a priority. As I see, the low-hanging fruit is prioritising and getting communities up and running quickly to be resilient and independent. They know their needs, they know their people, they know their territory, and above all, they know how to make their communities safe. They will require funding and probably no more than $2.5 to $3 million. Let's do it and start today, I implore you. And I repeat once again, the true meaning of civil defence is the protection of the ordinary lives of people against danger or harm. We need to do this, focus on this, and make the protection of our people as a priority. Thank you very much.
Richard. Nice. Well done. Thank you so much for sharing. And there are so many true parts to what you say and share with us this afternoon. And I think inadequate resourcing and inadequate funding is a huge one for us, and we're workshopping this afternoon after this meeting about that. But thank you for sharing Waimarama community's experiences. So I'll just open it up for question or comment. Alex, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I just, two things. I just wanted to share with you that the way you are thinking and feeling about community level resilience and civil defence is something that is commonly held across the region. We have got 10 localities across Central Hawke's Bay who've all articulated similar things to you and in different phases of what does community level resilience and planning look like. So you're in no way alone, and this is really important timing for how you've raised this. I actually just wanted to ask a question though about in 2014, when we look back to when things changed, why? What's your understanding of why that was changed in 2014 when you were told not to exist anymore?
I've got no idea, Alex.
Okay.
No idea at all. I was devastated when I heard.
Okay.
I've got no idea. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. After having such a great relationship with the Hastings District Council, and then the change, it was shattering really, and the consequences of it.
Thank you. Well, I'm certainly going to be asking that question of others to try and understand that a bit better, to make sure that we don't, so that as we approach how we move forward from now, that that we don't reiterate things that have happened in the past that have not gone as well as they should have. So,
When we were under the Hastings District Council and we had all these civil defence groups that we got together, it was a wonderful initiative, and the whole Hawke's Bay region got behind it, and we were going along so well until it was all just taken away. So.
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hazelhurst.
Thank you, Richard, for a great presentation. And just to correct the statement, it's just in the Hastings district that we're working with our resilience plans and standing up our communities. And what we've seen is now that we have 20 community leaders that are standing up, and even places like the Havelock North Community Centre are now standing up again as a civil defence headquarters, because in the cyclone they had a lot of people coming down to them. So Te Ranga Marae is standing up as a headquarters. So what we are doing now, there's just a whole lot of people standing up to be that show the leadership in local communities. So that's our future, and what that looks like, and how it's going to be coordinated, and how it's going to be funded. And the first tranche of money from Red Cross is 300,000 for 2 community centres, civil defence set up, and then we're applying to the next tranche to get some more. So, and they'll be trailers that will be based, and someone looking after them in each area, the Red Cross trailers. So that's the sort of coordinated approach that we need across the region for all communities to be able to have those facilities. But in the meantime, we just know that we have to get on and look after our communities post-cyclone. So you're absolutely right. And as a councillor, seeing the devastation of the Waimarama fires, and to see our rural fire, volunteer fire brigade all coming together and managing that huge disaster, and how hard they worked as volunteers, and to go back into that structure of FENS. But I think that there is definitely, standing up our community leaders, being well trained, well resourced, well funded, is definitely an opportunity for the future.
Can I just make 2 comments on that, Sandra? First thing is that when we had our civil defence groups before, they were not just rural, they were urban as well.
Yes.
So we had a good mixture of
Yes.
expertise in there.
Yes.
And the second thing is that I'd say is that it is my belief that we should be asking communities what they need in their communities, rather than saying, here's a trailer for you.
Yes.
We're asking for different things to Ocean Beach, and we'll be possibly asking for different things to other communities. So rather than saying, well, this is what you're going to get, I think that we should be asking communities what they need.
Yes. So that work is now happening with Trevor asking those questions for each group. So
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Barber.
Kia ora, Richard, and I support, obviously, being a member of the community, having been through the flood experience, the fire experience. Our community groups, civil defence, were invaluable. And when you're talking 30 odd Ks out, isolated communities, you need to have something on the ground there, ready to go. Even our marae in 2011 was no good because it was all flooded. Our kaumatuas, we had to bring them up home for those 3 days. We had 6 units of kaumatuas living at home. So the thing is, I think we have to take advantage. We have high enthusiasm, skilled people that are ready to go. And if it's just a bit of resource that they need to get this thing up and going, well, what's the issue? It's been taken back to the centre, but that's not always, I think and Gabriel has taught us that if we don't have the bits of resource, like the comms, the charges and whatnot, yeah, you know, those communities are left out on the limb. So makes a lot of sense. I don't think it's going to break the bank, you know, and it's really about having the people to drive, because if you don't have the people in the drive, well, then you're not going to get much, even if you've got the resource. So we've got the volunteers, and every community have that, eh? So, yeah, I think it's just about thinking a bit more laterally around how we can find solutions.
Thank you. Mr Simpson.
Yeah, thank you very much through you, Madam Chair, for your presentation. I think Gabriel represents for all of us a significant reminder of the power of nature. 65,000 people living in Napier became an isolated and under-resourced community during that event. So it shows the scale that we are actually looking at, not just the small isolated communities, but the risks to some of our largest centres as well.
Yes.
And I think we've really got to take that opportunity to say, are we meeting expectations?
Yes.
Have we got in place the systems and programs? And I think it even calls into question, you know, we've got a new National Emergency Management Bill going through, and we've got to really say, have we got the model right? Who drives the system? Where is the need, and how is that need then supported? And I think we've got to really look at how we gear our system up from the community through to those that need to provide us our assistance. And I think that's the key lesson for us. It doesn't matter where our community is, how large it is, at which end of which road it is. I think Gabriel demonstrated that we're all in the same boat, and I think we need to have a really good think about that.
And also, in my delivery, I also emphasised the need for us to be a bit more prepared for our biggest threat, for coastal communities. And we can't leave this issue behind. It needs to be acted on, because the results from something like that will be absolutely catastrophic.
Any other comments?
Just
Thank
a
you.
further comment through you, Chair. Mr McLeod did a review for us on our regional civil defence, and in there highlighted the importance of standing up communities. So we've heard this, and we need
Yes.
to make sure that what comes next is we implement that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all the supporters that have come along with you. It is definitely at the forefront of our minds. Now, please stay on, because the Emergency Management Bill changes will be presented later on today's agenda, and we will be keeping in mind workshopping into that financial support that is needed to move forward. So thank you very much. Kia ora.
Thank you very much,
Thank
and thanks
you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you, Richard.
Richard.
Could I have someone move and second receiving the deputation? Thank you, Mayor Hazelhurst, Mayor Walker. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Moving on to our decision items. Number 5, the Cyclone Gabriel CDM Group Response Review Terms of Reference and Framework. Would you like to lead us on this, Ian or Doug? Thank you, Doug.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So look, happy to take the report largely as read, but there's 3 in particular things that I would just like to raise, obviously following the receipt of the draft terms of reference from the last joint committee meeting. I do particularly want to thank the role of TKO for their support and feedback into the review terms of reference. They have provided, I will say, like really generous feedback to the review process overall. We have captured a large majority of that inside the review, but there's actually a large volume of that information that we'll be able to pass directly on to the review panel once that's been appointed. So again, just really want to acknowledge that, and certainly in terms of having rounded out the terms of reference, it's been a really beneficial process, and I think we can be really, again, proud of taking the extra time to get that right. Just talking about time, I do want to note, and again, appreciate the urgency and pace that the committee are looking for, particularly in terms of timeframes, and just probably noting the requirements in terms of HBRC's procurement processes that we are required to go through has added additional time into the program that we hadn't otherwise anticipated. So just noting on the bottom of what says page 5 on my agenda, is basically the updated timeframes in terms of particularly working through the procurement process. The very last one I just wanted to note really are the key changes, and again, apologies from Simplexity, the external support agencies that are again giving us some support in terms of developing the terms of reference. And on the bottom of page 4, middle of page 4, in particularly talks to the key areas of change that we have made through there. Again, they are highly summarised, but overall, I think we're in a really strong position as we move forward to really get the terms of reference up and running. I think that's a really important point in terms of like describing them as terms of reference in the framework. They are just that, and really it's going to be about how the review panel and the role of committee and community really bring that to life. So again, the terms of reference and the framework are just the beginning, and it's about how we all collectively as leaders and community and those involved in the review, again, bring the review to life. So yeah, look, happy to take any questions through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, and just commend you and the team for bringing this together. You have done a superb job. I'd like to invite Mr. Barber first to make any comment based on your involvement in the draft terms of reference, and then I'll go to Leon Symes on behalf of Te Kahui Ohanga. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Chair. From an iwi perspective, we certainly interested in outcome 3 of the review, strengthening relationships with mana whenua iwi hapu partner agencies and communities that support a coordinated approach to emergency management capability. I think, and not to go through, how it all kind of unfolded, but mana whenua iwi hapu marae, I think were key to the initial response, and so that needs to be acknowledged, firstly. Secondly, it's really around the question of, resourcing. A lot of our groups just got out and did it. We just spent the money, just poured the resource into what was needed, food, welfare items, you name it. But I guess in the future, in terms of the review, are we kind of canvassing that kind of, because it's an issue.
Yep. Doug?
Look, through you, Madam Chair, yes, I think we're going to have to look end to end on this, and I think the timing of the legislation review as well is going to be really timely, and particularly not just from the roles and responsibilities, but actually probably a sector look also at how we actually fund the system, which is civil defence. So, recognising that it is all of us, whether that's emergency services or councils, we all play a role in that. Clarity on that I think would be really good. One thing is 100% sure that we have, and we will always have responsibility for our own people, our maraes and our communities, and so we will act. It's just understanding the lanes under the legislation, civil defence, the responsibility that government has to protecting all of our communities. Not just leaving it to Māori iwi hapu to pick up in its resource where we can find it, etc., etc. I mean, it's a hard job. So a coordinated approach certainly would be needed going forward. But just in terms of a broader look at the review, I think it generally covers all the bases. But I'll pick up on something that Richard's talked about is some of our smaller, less resource communities, and how they kind of work into the CEDM system, because most of the time it's going to be rural, it's going to be isolated communities that get hit, and high populations of Māori living in those communities that are going to be impacted. So I think it kind of works to what the presentation we just had 5 minutes ago.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Mr. Symes, kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou, and through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to express our support for the terms of reference concerning the input we've had so far in the process. I know that communities like the delegation that see from Waimarama have voice in this whole process, and similarly the smaller communities in Wairoa have that voice. And I guess it comes down to going on the point that Mr. Barber was making about form and function. What are those roles of the local communities going forward in this review, and how can those voices and expertise and resources can be brought to bear in the likes of these situations, and what kind of role then does a centralised regional approach apply to that? So if we can utilise those resources throughout the community, then I think we're going to end with a structure that we can understand. We know where our role is and know what is best will work for our communities, because there are different variations and versions within communities that have different strengths and weaknesses. It's about how can we use those strengths, and then with a centralisation provide the resources that they need, particularly around funding and making sure that the funding allocation and resources for training, bringing people along into making sure they're rightly equipped and certified to help in these sorts of situations are going to be paramount. But not only with the review is making sure what legislative changes we need to make in terms of making sure participation at the joint committee table from a mana whenua perspective is there. Obviously in the current act it prevents us from having a say, a vote. I think that's going to be paramount for our tangata whenua for members moving forward, is about how can we have better say at a governance level, to then we can bring to bear the resources that we have at our disposal to, I guess, help and assist in these times. Kia ora mātou.
Symes, and that's the reason why we've invited you, Mr. Barber, and other PSGEs along this journey, although it's only in an advisory capacity currently, but we will support, the bill to look at those changes to include mana whenua with a stronger voice. Kia ora. Mayor Alex.
I just wanted to pick up on actually the commentary that's come up about the funding and capacity, but because actually the funding framework doesn't fundamentally sit in the review terms. It does talk about capacity and capability, but I think if we think about what is the system we need coming out the other end, the funding model is going to be imperative to its success. So it probably doesn't speak to it specifically in this because it's going to look rearwards, but when we get to the end of this, we're going to have to look forwards and go, well, what is that funding mechanism that looks right across community, local, regional coordination? And that's going to be a really important piece.
It's a key piece, I think. I mean, we can't have a review without hitting that nail on the head, because otherwise you're going to end up kind of similar. What we had is we had some with and there's some totally without. So, I think the review needs to be able to launch us into that discussion.
Absolutely.
Kapoe.
Mayor Sandra.
Kia ora. Thank you. I think we just need to move on and get on to this as fast as we can. People are ready now to be able to share and understand what happened and not lose that with delay. I'm just really interested in both outcome 4 and outcome 1. And outcome 4, emerging response practices, recognise and assess with a view to inform future emergency management approaches, including community arrangements. And so what our community connectors are doing right now is asking our community, what could we do better? And what have we learned? And what did we do well? So while out of scope, we know is access to community voices and mechanisms. In fact, we're not going out and talking to every community member, but our community connectors are. So I'm just interested in how we're going to capture from our community connectors, from these public meetings we're having every week, the stories that we are sharing, the surveys that people are filling out, and make sure that we capture it, because otherwise we're not going to meet those outcomes 1 and 4. So how we're going to get that through this delivery process, and that's just a question I'd like someone to
Thank you. Doug, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So look, practically, again, once we've landed the panel, look, I think there'll be some of those key inputs that will come through, but also recognising, I think, for us all as our individual TAs, again, the role that we will play, how we capture that local messaging and those local messages at a TA level or a district level. So again, certainly those will feed into this review. So yeah, just want to probably recognise that yes, there's the opportunity to pick them up at both the TA level, but I think again as we work through the finalisation of actually landing the review, again just what those opportunities are for those commonalities to be picked up. So
Thank you.
Mr Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I had similar notes, funnily enough. I go back to the minutes of our last meeting, and this body talked about the need to maintain critical community relationships through the review process. We talked about the narrative around the 24 hours either side of the cyclone. We talked about a new outcome to be added around understanding the expectations. In other words, why do communities have an expectation if that's not what we're putting in place? So we need to make sure that we have that clearly articulated. Some of these things I don't see reflected in the terms of reference. And then in the out of scope, of course, is the direct engagement with the communities, the very communities we need to hear from. So we've sort of got a bit of a contradiction in terms here, and I think we just need to make sure that, and while I understand that there is an expectation that the TAs are collecting some of that intelligence, passing it through,
Yes.
I just think we need to perhaps give the review panel the opportunity, if they feel the need, to directly communicate with communities, to create, their own context. I think that's currently missing from the terms of reference.
It might be helpful if Doug, on behalf of the CEs, maybe just outline how you envisage it going in terms of the capturing the community voice and how it's going to be enabled and passed through. And then the question from Mr Simpson about widening the ability for the panel reviewing on deep diving.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So look, I certainly, I won't speak for all of my fellow CEs, but I can reflect on my own situation whereby obviously we've gone out in a Central Hawke's Bay context and had conversations in each of our localities around some of the initial kind of findings, but like kind of lessons learned initially in terms of what resilience could look like, and sounds a very similar process to what Hiratonga Hastings is currently going through. So certainly as we have launched our internal processes for that, a lot of that feedback will fall back into that, which we will obviously pass back up to what will be the regional view, or review, I should say. Look, I think it is really important, and I touched on the comment earlier about it. The terms of reference are kind of a point in time, and it's really about then how the review panel brings ultimately the terms of reference to life. And I think that's an important role that both the committee can play, but ultimately will come down as well to the funding that's available for the review and the timeframes that sit alongside that. So, in a space of needing to move within a relatively swift period of time, but also recognising the budget that sits there. It looks like a lot of money, but in terms of the time that it's actually going to take, again, it's all just part and parcel of what is the wider resourcing and implications that need to sit alongside the review.
Mr Barber.
Yeah, kia ora. Just in terms of objective or outcome 6, which talks about specifically the role of mana whenua, participation engagement within levels of CEDM, and then you have kind of in scope, out of scope, kōrero in the review. I think we need to be clear that Māori, I did my own word search of the legislation, put in Māori, nothing, put in iwi, nothing, hapu, nothing, marae, nothing. So there needs to be, I think, from this review, a clear steer for NEMA. NEMA's on the call, huh? For NEMA to do the right thing and make sure that, with their review, that we're right through their legislation. because I think we'd be doing our Aotearoa a disservice if we didn't get that in there. So, that would be my whakaaro.
We do have a presentation on the bill, which will have a NEMA representative, so we can push that feedback in there as well.
Yep.
Yep.
But I think part of this review, there needs to be, I'm just saying that from Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi perspective, there needs to be either recommendations or a push to ensure that that's in as part of that review as well. There's a huge gap.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap. I mean, I'm invited to this week today, but, as an advisor, without any
Yeah.
ability to actually impact.
Doug?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, so again, just noting that the legislation is 20 years old, and I look across to Mr Wilson in the room as well from NEMA in terms of, potential advice on this one, but also noting we do have the additional paper. Look, I think, and just from the conversations that I've had with other NEMA officials as well, recognising the potential timeframes that will be announced in terms of the actual legislation review process, they are looking for feedback not just from this process, but obviously any ministerial review or similar that occurs as well. So, Christchurch was a long time ago, and dare I say, that's 10 or 11 years ago, and there will be undoubtedly lessons learned from other activities and events such as ours. So again, it's about making sure that we've got the time to, again, take our learnings and make sure that they're incorporated into a system that's right-sized for the long term. So, certainly that's the advice that I've had from the officials, that they are keen and willing to take away as many of the lessons from these events as they can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to back Doug up, he's quite correct. Very soon the timelines for the national review will be made available to you. That's being done at the national level. However, each group, there'll be a portion of that review will be for each group to supply their recommendations from this internal review that you're doing yourself, so they will be captured.
Right.
Are there any other questions or comments? No?
Through you, Chair, happy to move.
Happy to move? Happy to second?
No, I was going to ask further information through you, Madam Chair.
Question? Yes?
Yes, it was. Just looking through the terms of reference, there's a lot of reference to other organisations' debriefing processes, and that our review panel will be dependent upon that level of intelligence coming through. Have we got visibility or an understanding of whether those debrief processes will meet our timelines?
Doug?
Through you, Madam Chair, from the agencies that we have engaged with to date, I know a number of them are either underway or some of them are even complete. And it will be a process of sharing that. But so ultimately, look, there's going to need to be a high level of coordination between this review and other reviews that are undertaken at the same time as well. So, yeah.
So we've got a mover and a seconder. Thank you very much. Would you like to speak to the motion, Mayor Sandra?
As I said earlier, I think we just need to get on and get this underway, this review underway. And I think that a lot of the emergency management groups have already started a lot of their work. So I would like to think that under the time frame, if we manage to get through this earlier, to give our community some feedback on this review, then we would do that and not wait for December. I think that, they need some answers, and I think that we want this review to be able to give them some answers and a way forward. So I think that it is really important that we get underway. People have done a lot of work on this already, because you need to capture it early, this information, and I'd just like to think that, we don't wait another 6 months to understand what this looks like.
Absolutely. Mayor Walker?
Thank you. Look, this is well overdue to get moving. This should have happened quite a number of weeks, if not months ago. So I'm really pleased that this is now getting underway. And I think we've landed in a good place. But in terms of expectations, I think we have to remind ourselves that very few people in our community actually interfaced with the half a dozen people that are employed by the Civil Defence Group Office. And so actually this is a whole of system that requires our territorial authorities and all community agencies and emergency agencies to be connecting into this to truly understand the bigger picture. And that's going to be vital to understanding whether ultimately the role and function of the group office is fulfilling what it needs to for our region. And I think it's also timely to point out that in this review of the system, it also involves what does the leadership and governance of this system look like as well, and incorporated in the terms of reference. It's been referred to in terms of the role of mana whenua sitting with us as decision makers, but even just reflecting on some of the background to this paper that talks about the hot debrief survey that's been used for the staff that have gone through the GECC to make sure that any issues are front of mind, that consideration has not been afforded of governance, and governance have not been allowed to participate in a process like that. So we as governors and leaders in the region are still sitting in a place where we haven't been afforded that respect to be asked what our experiences were yet, and so very much looking forward to that. And also the role that all of our local controllers had interfacing into it, and I do hope that this process is now going to give us all that opportunity to provide that feedback into the system. And also important, and I'm going to raise this again later in the agenda, but I just would like to speak to our mana whenua, that yes, the legislation doesn't currently afford you the respect required to participate in the civil defence structure, but this is something that has been identified by this group before now, and has been an outstanding action for officers to join the dots to bring this governance table together since November 2021. And has not been acted on. But thanks to the leadership of our current chair, who has reached out to make sure that those connections are made, that we have, although it's not as decision makers, as the legislation doesn't allow it, but you're at the table with us and your contribution is much valued. Thank you very much for being there. And just want to reiterate, that was November 2021, that this was an action that sat for the officers of this group to action, and it has taken until now, post a national state of emergency and our new chair to come on board for that to happen. But aside from all of that, let's get into this, because it's vital, absolutely vital to the future of the region, that we get down to what happened here and how we make and improve the system for the future, because it is very clear that confidence is lacking, and we need to get back to a place where this group and our leadership can be seen as a trusted source to look after our communities in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Walker. Any other speakers? There are none. The motion is on the table. All those who agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora. Thank you very much. Decision item number 6, the Joint Committee mana whenua representation. We have a paper here, and Doug, are you leading us in this, or Ian?
Leanne and I were the ones that drafted the paper. So I think Mayor Walker's already discussed some of it. Obviously, this preempts some of the changes that are in the bill, but obviously it's been an outstanding action, which was also part of the strengthening CDM and Hawke's Bay report and is on the group work program to complete. So that's obviously the work was done by yourself and others to get this through. So the recommendations are in the report.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Thank you, Craig Little.
Yeah, hey,
Mayor
look,
Little.
this has been a long time coming, and, you know, it was really apparent after the cyclone, but just interesting on item 8.2 there. I think if we're going to get serious about partnerships and what we're saying, you know, mana whenua, you know, they aren't still even allowed to vote around the table. You know, that's just crazy, come on. Legislation doesn't allow it, but I'm sure as partners of our partners, a voice through the Joint Committee, surely, you know, we either do it properly or we don't do it at all.
Absolutely. Questions, comments?
Let's, sorry. Let's not be shy at leading the way
Absolutely.
across the country.
Mr. Barber?
Yeah, kia ora. Me little, you know, total with that. I think it, I think in terms of Aotearoa, and what we do in times of bad and in times of good, we've always had a kind of a kanohi ki te kanohi relationship with our mayors and our chair. And I think that needs to continue. And the national legislation we're not there, understand that. But if there's any way that the regional committee can make, and it's normally these things are unanimous decisions, but it's just it's the optics and it's the whole thing around the treaty partnership. We come to the table, we don't just come with the kore noiho, we come to talk and contribute to decisions. So, I fully support that direction. Kia ora.
Ian, if I can ask, at the governance level, it seems 100% acceptable and acknowledged and valued. What does it mean within the bill, if you can comment now, for at the management level? Because I think that's really the next big step.
Oh, okay, so, well, I think we'll go through the bill, but there is providing for a representation on the KEG, or the
Yes.
Coordinating Executives Group as well. Can I just say that when we were doing this, that I did seek advice from Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet Legal before this, and their advice was, no, you couldn't have on as in voting under the current legislation. I pushed back on that, but I haven't had a reply back. My view was slightly different, but I haven't had a view back, and obviously we've just had to get this going anyway, so this is where we've got to.
Any other comment?
I think it's probably an important thing to note, and whether it needs to be in the terms of reference or not, but actually how we operate at a regional level with our mana whenua is actually never about raising your hand and voting. Actually, it is about talking through the issues and making decisions by consensus always. And I think that's actually an important part of the intent, even if the terms of reference and the law aren't up with us, Baden. That is generally the intent that we take into this as regional leaders. So.
But I still, just to you, I still think that's not quite there.
I know.
No. Are there any further comments on what changes have been made to the terms of reference?
I think it covers it.
Okay, if there are none, or no further comments or questions, you happy to move Mayor Walker? Happy to second Mayor Little? Would you like to speak any further?
I think I've had my say.
Mr. Barber, would you like to speak before we
Before you
Move
pass,
this?
move
Yep.
the terms of reference? Yeah, look, I mean, reviews are to learn from the past, but move into the future there.
Absolutely.
And I think the intent within where we're trying to get to is the right place to be, yeah? There's some major gaps within the legislation, and I've already talked about that. But I think the understanding around the table is that, we've been through every major disaster in Hawke's Bay as a people. Go right back to the earthquake in before. We will be here, haere mātou mo te neke atu. So it's just really so important that mana whenua perspectives, in terms of participation, contribution and acknowledgement and resourcing, needs to be part of CEDM solution for the betterment of the community. And hika, we were just putting stuff on on trucks and choppers and sending it out wherever it needed to go. It wasn't always just to our people. A lot of the times it was going wherever. And so we're all about the well-being of our people, and I say Māori and Pākehā. So let's get this waka in the right space and place, with us all on it together, heading in the right direction. That would be my only comment. Anything less than that's going to be a disservice to our people.
Kia ora, Mr. Barber. Mr. Symes?
Yeah, to you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to koutou and support Neil Walker and Neil Little's points they raised. We have other forums, regional forums, where mana whenua do have an equal say and right. We cannot see why this same committee cannot be afforded the same ability. So we'll be working closely with the new legislation that's going through to make sure that those barriers are not put in place going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Symes. All those who...
Before you just say, just my observant CE has just picked up on the voting on 15. It's a bit confusing because it actually says each local authority member had one vote at the meeting of the group when the group is required at any time to make a decision in respect of the action to be taken by the group or each member, including tangata whenua representatives. It's sort of...
Oh,
So we've given you one-on-one shot.
I think that's a typo.
I don't think that,
So 15.1.
Oh, that was an and or.
it's probably not supposed to be there, I don't think, is it?
No, is that supposed to be there, Leanne? Or no? Thank you for picking that up.
Yeah, there.
We're going against legislation. We've jumped the gun.
That's where we were trying to go, but
So if we can have that deleted, if you're happy to still move and second that, although we'd like it there. Thank you.
Yes. So the resolution becomes as amended rather than
As amended,
as
yes.
proposed.
We happy with that? Yep. Okay, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora. I do note we are having the item later around the emergency management bill, but I would like us to consider a joint approach as well as individual approaches to the bill, if that's what our mana whenua groups choose. So I just want to open that offer. We move on to the information items. So number 7, the regional recovery verbal update. So kia ora, Ian, I'm expecting that's you or
it's actually Ross.
Ross. Oh, kia ora, Ross.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep this fairly brief. We are in the process of both carrying out the work of the Regional Recovery Agency and building out the Regional Recovery Agency as we go to assist the region with recovery matters. I think the first thing I'd like really is to acknowledge the work in recovery that's been done by other agencies and communities around the region. So very much the work of the agency is about coordinating and drawing together that other work that's being done by mana whenua organisations, by council organisations, by businesses and communities, and by government agencies involved in that work. So very much acknowledge that work and the importance of it, and place the role of the agency very much in coordinating across that work and coordinating to government in that work is the main thrust of the agency, and that will change and evolve as we go through the recovery planning phases. Probably two sort of matters we're engaged in at the moment. One is the first iteration of the Regional Recovery Plan, and that is very much drawn from the locality plans that have been produced by PSGEs and iwi Māori organisations and councils, and pulling that together into a first iteration plan that's very much about restoration and standing communities back on their feet. The first version of that is due with the Cyclone Recovery Unit and the Minister this Friday, and that's a work in progress and working with organisations to finish that off, noting that there's further iterations to come which will be more focused on building back better and building resilience into our community. So very much a staged process. And I think the other item that we're very much engaged in is supporting the councils in their work around land categorisation and discussions with the government around how the future of severely affected land plays out and how that sits within the broader recovery frame that the councils and the communities are facing in terms of infrastructure and other matters. So that's where the work's going, very much a matter of working with agencies and communities within the region and supporting that work as it needs external assistance.
Thank you, Ross. Ross is our Regional Recovery Agency CEO for the Hawke's Bay. So thank you for that update. Many of us have the advantage of hearing from you often, but if there's anything in particular that we have for Ross to possibly answer, there isn't. Thank you very much, Ross. Kia ora.
Thanks, Ross.
Have a mover and a seconder, Mayor Alex and Mayor Sandra. All those who agree say aye.
Right.
Those against, thank you, Ross. The Emergency Management Bill, Ian. Can I please hand it to you to introduce and then pass on? Thank you.
Obviously, the bill still hasn't been read yet, officially read in Parliament. That was my understanding from Dave Vaughan on Friday, but if that's incorrect.
No, that's correct.
But it has been released, and obviously I've attached the summary provided to us by NEMA. So I've asked Ian Wilson from NEMA to give a short presentation on the bill, the key aspects of the bill. And then really what I'm asking for in the paper is if you've got any advice or comments about how you want to draft submissions and all that sort of process. But what I'm understanding is that the Select Committee may not meet on this until maybe even early next year.
Right.
So we've got a little bit of time,
Yes.
including our review.
Thank you, Ian. We'll pass it over to you.
Oh, that's all right. On the, if you come up here, Ian. Sitting on the. Oh, you can go.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ian Wilson Takalunga. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the invite, and thank you, members. As Ian has just stated, yes, the new Emergency Management Bill has been presented to the House. However, it was due for its first reading last week. Unfortunately, they didn't get there. We're hoping it'll be read this week or in the very near future. It is certainly the Minister's wish that it be read very soon. I thought just to start with...
Sorry, we'll just get you on this one here. We'll get rid of all the side.
I'll get rid of those, yes.
Yeah, enlarge it.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. And we'll just quickly... I thought just to give you a quick overview is where it started from, and you'll be aware that, I guess back in 2017, there was the Pigeon Valley fires, there was the Port Hill fires, Kaikoura, and then we could probably go back to the Christchurch earthquake where certainly the Minister felt the communication and the systems at that stage required an enhancement and a lot of fine-tuning. So that started in 2017. The TAG report came out of that, and it identified a number of changes, and basically most of those changes have been put in place, and you'll be aware that we've now got the fly-in teams, we've got the enhanced training, and also the bill came out of it. And in 2022, obviously the trifecta was born as part of the TAG review as well. Our legislation wasn't fit for purpose. They felt that the word civil defence wasn't really fit for purpose either, and there was roles, functions, they all conflicted. So they decided that they'd have a look at the legislation, but we'd also look at the National Guide to the Plan, rewrite that, look at the roles and functions under that, and also look at the national strategy that was there. So it was called the trifecta. And all these intersect with each other and all carry very important roles that actually flow off each other or actually influence each other as well. So the bill was actually introduced to the House on the 7th of June. It's had its hasn't had its first reading yet. But once it's been read, there'll obviously be opportunities for submissions. Now, the Minister is very keen to have this extended. There was a short term for submissions, but he wants it now extended, basically on the back of Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland View. He wants to capture everything you've learnt there. He'd like to incorporate into it if possible and get it get a bill that is fit for purpose on our learnings and our current updates. As it's got there, it's unlikely to be passed before, I guess, government arrives at the end of this, but it hopefully will be done soon. So what's changing? Civil defence. It's felt that's an antiquated term, and it's now going to be moved over to the emergency management. As you're aware, we've got the National Emergency Management Agency. Civil Defence Group will become an emergency management committee, and I won't read the rest, but there's subtle changes like that. The group's been moved out and it's become area control, so you make it look, really what it is and where it is. It's also clarified the roles. Now, a lot of these roles are not going to be clarified in legislation, in the bill, but they will be clarified in the guide. What it's looking at there is ensuring that the roles of the NEMA will be one section, roles of your group will be one section, and the roles of each of your TAs will be one section. So they'll be clearly defined. And even in the bill, it started to look at that. And some of them clearly sit within the Emergency Management Committee, i.e. this group, and some of them clearly sit within the local authorities. If you have a look at the bottom of the slide there, the roles around identifying the needs of iwi Māori and the role of iwi Māori in communications to others is there, and that's sitting at the group level. That's supposing that the group will actually the committee, I should use the correct word, the committee will make the decisions here as the governance group, and you'll then hand it to the coordinating executive group as the operational group or the group to actually enact them. As Mr Palmer's quite rightly pointed out, our Act doesn't carry a lot in respect of iwi, Māori, hapu. In fact, I don't think those words are even mentioned.
Not such.
Yep. So the Crown's recognised that and has recognised that the Torito of Waitangi needs to be forefront in this. So it's actually been incorporated into it. It's also proposed to establish a new National Maori Emergency Management Advisory Group. Now this is, will be appointed by the Minister. It can range between 5 and 8 members, and it will provide advice to the Director of NEMA. So that'll be fairly influential and fairly at a high level, but we'll be able to enact how Māori see what the legislation will be, how it will enact on them, and what the arrangements could be, not only at a strategic level, but also at an operational level. As has already been said, our members are going to be appointed to the emergency management committees and emergency coordinating executives. Now, at the moment, that says the minimum must be 1 member. It's actually leaving it up to you to decide how many members you wish to have on and how that's looked at, whether it's going to be voting, whether you put them in, so they'll have full, participation within your emergency management committee.
With voting.
With voting rights, yes. You'll be a full member. It's also providing for Māori within the emergency management and in the national plan. So the roles and functions in there will have obviously iwi Māori roles there. And it's also looking at engaging with Māori on emergency management plans to include for coordination during emergencies and how that's going to be done and how the response will be done. The last part that we're looking at is looking at financial costs and services. Iwi Māori will have direct access to us. You won't put your claims through the group, they'll come straight to us. As part of that, the Minister last week at the meeting here, basically working with them, says we will come around and obviously train and outline exactly what the requirements are under our Act to get reimbursement, so you will have a clear understanding of where that sits, what it is. If you incur it, you'll get it. If you still choose to incur it, you actually bear that cost. But we will give that training before that event. Well, I'll say before that event if we don't have any within the next year, but that's probably a bit pushing it a lot.
They're suggesting a whole different section. So we have a section 33. Iwi Māori might have their own section.
No, you'll still be in within 33. It'll just say how you're actually going to claim, and 33 will be expanded. Now, the guide also has the roles and functions, obviously, of NEMA, and under that is a financial section. I'm part of that group to look at what we should be considering. And look, we've already recognised iwi need to be in there. We've already recognised animal welfare is not exactly the best as well. We've also looked at other welfare services that keep people out of their homes, and if it's repaired, they can actually go back into the home and get them out of motels and the psychosocial issues. So there's a lot of grey area at the moment that we need to actually address, and hopefully when we get time and get back to BAU, we'll actually have a look at this and say, actually, this is what's more suitable. And that's when we'll come back to the groups. You've actually got members on these groups as well from out the country, and say, actually, we do need to consider this. This needs to be within the financial, or this is welfare. And then we can clearly put that to government. If they choose to accept it, then that will be in there, and it'll be really clear, he says with crossed fingers.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, it's...
We've got many examples right now of businesses and community groups who are significantly out of pocket from responding to Cyclone Gabrielle and have been told no by their associated Crown agencies when it comes to recompense. So
at the
it
moment,
certainly needs clarifying.
look, I do agree. I can't disagree with you, Mary Alex. Section 33 really only covers the welfare components of food, clothing, transport out of an emergency place, and accommodation. The rest, though, can sometimes be picked up in a meal relief fund. Ideally, if we put them into the welfare fund, we could do away with the meal relief fund and perhaps not have those issues further imposed on councils to actually go through that step as well. Other agencies respect, hopefully, when we get to the Act, it will clarify their roles and their understandings. MPI is a classical understanding how they support animals or the farming. So equitable outcomes. It's also recognised that the Emergency Management Committees need to, I guess, identify and engage with specific communities for the development of their plans. That's on top of iwi. There's other ethnic communities out there that you need to engage with. There's also the disabled communities, blind, deaf. We need to look at those and how we will look at them and how, I guess, the group will respond and deal with those in their plans. Iwi and Māori still have identified in here actually how you're going to work with them and how you're going to develop it. And it's also looking at communities that are isolated or experiencing material hardships. We're starting to widen that gap of where we're looking at how we're going to support them and how we need to address those. And the emergency management committee plans must actually show those. It doesn't at the moment. It's a plan that it will be. And that is actually explaining why, I guess, in a lot of ways, we've actually held off doing the plans at the moment because of the consultation on hazards and risks of how they intersect with iwi Māori, ethnicity, other groups that are dealt with or under pressure, under stress or disadvantaged.
Yeah, Aidan?
Just in terms of these proposed changes, have they come about internally through the department, or have they come through some initial submissions?
Submissions.
Yeah.
We've actually been out and done a lot of submissions, a lot of workshops with iwi, with Māori, with the communities, with other ethnicities and all the groups as well. So they've all provided feedback to us,
right,
and then they've been incorporated into the plan. Now, you can have another say on that with your submission period as well, if you don't think it fits.
We, we rallied with the short time frame that we had in that initial submission period to put some whakaaro together. So, yeah, it's good to see that it's been considered. How about it?
Excellent.
Ian, can I take you back to your last slide? You talked about holding off on a plan. Do you mean the group plans?
So it's now being called emergency committee plans, not group plans anymore.
Right, because our last group plan ended 2019?
Yep.
2014 to 19.
Yep, that's the official period. It hasn't ended, it's still in act, it's still valid. It's just that was when it was due for review.
Right, thank you.
Just trying to find the last page here. Also, though, we're clarifying the roles and responsibilities of, I think we call them lifelines at the moment. They're going to become critical infrastructures. And that's going to look at how hazards and risks are going to be identified, how they could be addressed, and also how they plan to actually respond to them. Not only that, they'll be asked to supply to you what period or what will be their service level after an event. Now, some of them may say that they actually can't supply any service after an event, but they'll be required to say how long that will be for. Will it be 2 weeks, 4 weeks? What are they putting in place? How are they putting in place? Others will say we can only supply 10% of what we supply now, but that will be actually made available to you and their website so you can actually understand what it is and how it is. There will also be a lead agency within the critical infrastructure under power. It could be Genesis, it could be Trust Power, it could be anyone, but they will actually have the lead role to ensure that all the other agencies comply as well. And also the Minister and the CEO of NEMA will actually have the ability to actually review those and call them, have a look at it. We actually have that power at the moment, but it's not done. It looks like it has been strengthened, and perhaps that is available to the Minister to have a look at now.
Nigel?
Just on critical infrastructure and lifeline infrastructure, which was a really big issue here post cyclone. Sort of watching with interest in Australia, the government's going a bit further in terms of changing the obligations on directors and boards of critical lifeline. Is anything proposed in that regard with this bill?
Sorry, my apologies, I was trying to catch up on my slides.
So, like, for example, here, because these become the issues for directors sitting around tables. So, look, there was nothing, I guess, nothing new in the fact that the substation at Redcliffe was a known risk for quite a long period of time. So, I guess it's that tension between the obligations that directors have to shareholders versus the delivery of critical lifeline infrastructure, and whether that balance is right. In terms of what directors' obligations, I mean, it might be something we make a submission on. I was just wondering whether, what increasingly that whole critical infrastructure, and particularly the issues around data and cyber, as well as lifeline infrastructure, seems to be some really emergent developments, overseas now around.
There certainly is. I can't actually answer that.
I might be able to help there. So there's definitely requirements for them to do regular reports to NEMA, I think.
There is.
Not too sure who to.
It goes to the lead agency for a start.
Right. So definitely there is requirements for regular reporting, but not to the depth where you're talking about, where people have made accountable at that director.
So I think the question is, will we see anything like that in the bill?
I don't know, actually, to tell you the truth.
Doesn't sound like it appears.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not from what I've
submission.
Well, the bill introduces a requirement for critical infrastructure entities to report annually to the Director of Emergency Management and their agencies.
Yeah, but report against what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it'll be the levels that they set, however, they haven't been set yet. And of course, I guess the lead agency and the agencies in conjunction with NEMA and will set those. However, this has actually been delayed. We've given a bit of a service level delay, in fact, to bring it online so we can actually discuss this and look at what the emergency levels will be as well. So it's not going to come on straight away in that.
Leon, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to the opportunity for participating for iwi Māori in this, it's great to see the avenue and doors are open, but I guess from a resourcing point of view about participating and engaging with Māori, is NEMA giving any thought about resourcing that? Because it's just another, I guess, issue that's taxed on to iwi Māori groups about engaging and participating in the process, and not any thought being given to that over there. Obviously the channel's open, but to be fully able to import into this process, then will need to be some resourcing made available, whether that's through central government or is NEMA expecting that to fall back on ratepayers?
I can't actually answer the resourcing level or where it's going to sit or what, but what I can say is that we're very aware of it. We are actually looking at how this process should be dealt with iwi Māori. We're looking at pulling together a development program that we're going to roll out with the groups and iwi Māori, and so actually, is this how it should be done? These are some of the hints that can be done. This is the process and these are the templates that could be then how you're actually going to do it. And we'll roll it out right across the country in the next year. But unfortunately, we haven't got that ready just yet. So we're working on it, and we're working on obviously understanding the pressures that iwi under, the pressures the groups are under, and how this should be done in respect to the development with Māori.
Leon, in local government land, we call it unfunded mandates, and we've got thousands of them too.
I wasn't going there.
Just want clarity, that's all.
Thank you.
No. That said, though, we are looking at this stage, and it's still on the table, funding the iwi Māori representatives to your Emergency Management Committee and the coordinating executive groups in the short term, so that it does lessen that burden on the group. One other thing with the critical infrastructure, the terms have been changed a little bit more instead of lifelines, and it's actually can be made by the minister by noting in the Gazette, so it's actually widening the scope of what they could be, and they've actually got to be critical, I guess. Well, the name says critical anyway. For the people, i.e. it could be banking services, it could be electricity is definitely one, telco. Some of the other ones that are out there that are not quite met and don't quite, Lifeline's is one that, sorry, the actually services and foodstuffs, that's not in our critical infrastructure at the moment, but that should be. Perhaps that's one that will be gazetted as well. So it's just opened that door a little bit wider on the definition of what a critical infrastructure will be. Just to finish, obviously the Select Committee will call for written submissions. You can talk to that as well, but we're looking at extending that. I would obviously recommend that within the KEG you look at how you want to do that, what the structure should be. Strongly recommend you read the new bill. We did get, as I said, feedback from the groups. Some of the feedback at the moment is that we haven't followed all that feedback, so you might want to have a close look at it. And obviously get it into us, and if you want to talk to us, we have got people that can actually help you through it and advise you. We can't comment on the bill per se, because it's actually in the House now, but we can provide at least advice on how to do it or what it should be.
Thank you, Ian. Any further questions or comments? No? Bill?
The original tag that was worked up post Kaikoura, if I remember rightly.
2016, 2017?
Yeah.
Yep.
That drew a lot on, shall we say, the emergencies of the time. It also coincided, unless I'm mistaken, with a change in government and a handover from Brownlee to Whāwhoi.
Correct.
Yep. And there was a lot of agreement between the two of them, actually, as to what changes need to be made. And there were quite close, shall we say, cooperation.
Yep.
It's then drifted, in particular, and I don't mean drifted in a bad way, but I mean it was held back while NEMA was formed, and to give NEMA a chance to find its feet and look at, shall we say, the way the life sat. And now here we are again, going across an election, and you're going to introduce, but it's unlikely to be passed, is it? So
I don't know.
I don't think it can be. I guess for me, as I'm interested, is there still a high level of agreement?
There is still sign-off by all parties that this should go through as it is.
Because that's what Brownlee did on the first one, didn't
Yeah. There, as you're aware in the media, I guess Mr Brown has also raised some serious questions about it. So whether they wish to adhere to that protocol of actually we've all agreed to what is there and common purpose, I'm not sure.
Ian, next steps.
So, well, obviously, we don't know exactly the timeframes yet as to when the submission is going to be required. And we've also got the election as well. And as has just been pointed out, if we do get a new government, then things may change. So, I'm just sort of guided by you as to how you would like that to go. Do you want to have a discussion around what's directly in the bill, and any questions or any issues that you may have, that would be obviously separate to this, so that then we can start working on drafting up a submission. Are you quite happy with us drafting a submission, or on behalf of the group? But there's nothing to stop individual councils, I think, from making a submission either if you really want to. Which I probably actually encourage.
One thing I should have also said under the, we've got the legislation, but we'll have the regulations, and part of that regulations, our CEO will be actually able to make regulations for the sector. They'll have to be signed off by the Minister and the Ethics Committee. However, those regulations can only be made at peacetime as well, so you'll get to see them before they're signed off, if they do come in. But that's a new power that's been given to the CEO of NEMA.
Yep. Committee members, next step, yes, Alex.
Is there anything, Ian, in this about strengthening our hand in terms of risk management and directive that group can give across territorial authorities about where zones and building and natural hazard risk can play out? Is there a strengthening of that hand, or is it silent?
No, it's not silent. I know it's actually quite to the fore, and there's a new way of actually assessing the hazard and risk. But I'm not sure whether that's included in the bill or just on the hazard risk that we were looking at anyway. So I can't actually, I've got a feeling it has been strengthened though, but I couldn't say with hand on heart.
Okay, I would be quite keen to explore what that looks like. So pre the emergencies we've been dealing with, there was certainly expressed from this table an increased appetite to be a lot more directive in that space around what the risk appetite for the region should be when it comes to particularly those zoning and development activities. I think it's something worth us digging into a bit to see what's in there and what's relevant and what are some of our learnings that we could pass through into. I'd be quite keen to see that. The Lifelines critical infrastructure piece, I think, is another one that we probably should have an opinion on. The role of mana whenua in the system, I think we should have an opinion on. And the role of strengthening the role of local and community and subsidiarity is also pretty vital to what we know the success of the survival of our region has been. So that's my early thoughts.
Thank you,
My
Mayor Walker.
apologies for sounding rather evasive, but we didn't actually see the bill until it came out either, so. No idea what was in it.
Bless it.
Well, can we leave that to our CEs to draft?
Yes.
Yep, and circulate?
Yep. Through you, Chair, can I just add the definition of and confirming roles and responsibilities and support agencies, that slide that you had there, just back a few.
How do you go back on this?
There is, it's quite clear in our community, and I don't know if the bill actually really addresses it, but
Is that the one?
our community doesn't, yes, that's it. Our community does not understand what both of those authorities, local authority and emergency management committees do. So in terms of, they used to, they had civil defence headquarters, they knew who was running what, and they did before this introduction and this change, but they don't now. And that was very, very clear. And every community meeting we go to, people say, nobody was here for us. Nobody knows the different roles and responsibilities of who's here under civil defence emergency management and how we stand up, communities and resilience in the future. So I think that's absent, and I think that needs to be included in the submission, those roles and responsibilities, and making sure that community knows that we're all in there as well.
And I acknowledge it, Mayor Sandra, and that goes to Councillor Simpson's point around expectations and understanding and education around who civil defence is, or we now called, emergency management
committee,
who they are.
Yeah.
And just clarifying for our community to understand what they do and what their role is.
Yes.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah, I think just further to that, through Madam Chair, I think there's that great myth that somebody on a great white stallion is going to come riding over the hill and say, I'm here from civil defence. I think it's that's the myth that continues to be perpetrated. The reality is anyone from any agency responding in the community is part of the facilitated response. And that's that key piece of education that keeps falling through the gap every time there's an event. And how we overcome that, I don't know, and I'm not even certain that this legislation is going to solve that problem either. But I think there's certainly, and that's why I strongly have been pushing for the review post-Cyclone Gabriel, that we really try to pinpoint what that gap in understanding is so that we can address it going forward.
Ian?
Yeah, and look, I totally agree with Councillor Simpson. Look, every time when I got to stand up in front of the media, I pushed this "we are all civil defence" message, and that all of the agencies were working coordinated by the civil defence group at the GCC. And it doesn't matter how many times you push that, people, even now, I've seen commentary just recently where people are talking about, we saw New Zealand Defence Forces, but they didn't realise that was all being coordinated out of the group coordination centre, basically. Police were there fire and emergency with the, we were all coordinating as best we could together, given the circumstances. So I think that's just one of the biggest challenges that we've always got, is to how do we actually get that message through to the community. And I think it actually starts with the agencies, actually, to a point. Because if the agencies turn up saying we're part of civil defence, and that was something else that we tried to push, so that when the soldier knocks on the door, he says, on behalf of civil defence, I'm from the army, I'm here on behalf of civil defence.
Yes.
But even then, it was a struggle. So,
And it's still a struggle.
Yeah.
So, so that education of, for the events this weekend and the rain anxiety that everybody was facing, and not knowing how big this event was going to be, for them to be able to know where to go to get the information. It's, and you guys did a great job with that, but, it's just bringing that same message. This is where you go for information. And that's the stuff we struggle with, because people, they don't know.
Just to wrap that together, we go right back to David's commentary when he talked to us about community and their community's issues.
Richard.
Richard, sorry. And this is where we have to be really clear. Is CEDAM bottom up or top down? That's what we have to start defining. Emergency management within communities is actually community up. And that's what we have to get this message through, is how this mechanism or how the system works most efficiently and effectively. And that's about identifying and addressing the local needs and formulating processes that are then supported either at the local government or at the group level, and then again support or coordinated within the region and then supported nationally. We've got to flip this thing, because at the moment there's still this perception that things are driven from the top. And that's the flip that we need to make through this process.
Right. Mayor Little.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think we're making communities relax too much and relying everything on civil defence. And examples is, in the weekend I've had a couple of calls, well, where's civil defence? We're getting the rain. We've got no communications, and what do we do now? So we'll get in the car, go down the road, and see where your phone works, But so they're relying too much on us too. So we've just got to be careful. We're not making a nation of or a nanny state where we're doing everything. There's still a lot of onus on everybody to actually look after themselves, look after their neighbours, look after their whānau as well. And we just got to be careful we don't take that away.
Baba.
Yeah, you got to have a strong centre, but that centre only works when you got the comms, and you got telephone and all that. But for the first 3 days, normally there's nothing of that.
Right.
So, it starts with your own preparedness, family, but you're going to have community, whether it's Māori through, tribal hapu marae systems, or whether it's community systems, you've just got to have that in there. So I think the legislation, needs to be pockets of, innovation or whatever, to work, to get that community up, connection with the centre. It's got to be an and, otherwise there's big gaps.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. That was really useful and interesting on where we're heading to, looking forward.
Thank you.
So thank you for your time. Any closing comments before we shut off the meeting?
I was going to say, just to answer Baden's, I agree there's got to be something to make them move, and I think you're all aware. That's actually now. You only have a very short time frame following every event where people realise actually it's a little bit more serious than I thought, or I needed to do something. If you let it go, we go back to our old New Zealand number 8 wire and we're good to go. You've got a very short time frame and you've really got to act now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive the update? Councillor Simpson.
Could we add something?
Sure.
That the coordinating executive group and group controller work with the TAs and Mana Whenua to draft a submission for circulation.
I'm happy with that, absolutely.
Yes, happy to second.
All those agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried, kia ora. I think that's the end of our meeting. Yes, it is, the official meeting. After number 9. Just testing you. I was looking at the coffee and the biscuits over there.
So the purpose of this report really is just to give you an update as to where we're at, and I'm specifically talking about the Civil Defence Group office here. But obviously we're still working with a number of the agencies and councils as we move forward. The key thing for me is around making sure that we've got capability to respond, and that is a challenge. There is people is probably the biggest concern that I have, but at the same time, as evidenced by the last 4 or 5 events that we've had since Gabrielle, since the end of April, we are able to stand up a response and support people with information and start to the response processes around having coordination meetings with our controllers and all the rest of it. So we've had a number of those over the last few days for the last weather event. We are starting to get back into working, heading towards our business as usual. Community engagement, for example, that is a huge challenge, working with the councils. Like the 3 staff that I have that work in that area, and I had 1 vacancy. So that new person starts very soon, next week in fact. And then I think one of the key things too, paragraph 27, what we've found is in that community response space is that there's a number of different agencies out there working with communities, and what we're trying to do is pull them all together, because separately we don't have the resources, but together we will have. And so what we're trying to do is pull all those different agencies together and come up with a coordinated plan as to how we deal with supporting community response moving forward. And that's really about it. I think the rest of it's all pretty much taken as read, unless you've got any questions.
Any questions for Ian? Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Ian. Just on the community engagement and community resilience planning piece, there's some urgency about how we can upscale in that. So I know you're talking here about discussions with emergency services, community engagement team leaders, workshops with councils, emergency services. But I just want to make sure that we get some language in there about pace, because actually Richard's deputation today is one example of multiple examples that I know of across the region. And it might be even that there is a key piece which is an engagement, say, with Red Cross, for instance, about how we can unlock some support that's actually going to go directly to them. It's a very important first step to creating some pace in a coordinated way. We can't take a long-term approach to that community resilience building. It has to be, we've got to survive until the summer, basically.
So that meeting is in the next few days.
Great, thank you.
So on that, a report back or feedback at our next joint committee would be great. Any other questions?
Through you, Chair, I just think that we clearly need to understand the lanes that people are working in and the community engagement. And I've seen our resilience plans coming together from our team, and I'm very pleased to see the progress that has been made. So it's sort of once again understanding, how while there can be facilitation from civil defence and emergency management, but I think that, we know our communities. We've got lots of community leaders, and they're ready to go and be empowered. So it's coming back to that localism model and not the centralised model, the national model, of actually making sure that we do this right now and that we all get these plans underway under your facilitation. And I just think that that's got to be clear. I mean, you've got, 8 or 10 people, 12 people in the staff, and you can have facilitators and coordinators, but actually our leaders, we've got to get up and stand up these resilience plans and as fast as possible. And I think that, our crew, our our staff know that the absolute significance of that now. And so I just, I just think that we need to be, working on that really, really well and quite clearly the defined lanes.
Yep. So, Ms. Sandra, your crew are involved in this.
Yes.
And we are actually at the moment working towards, in your district, your priorities.
Yes.
So that's how we're doing, and definitely we are just the facilitators or the subject matter experts.
Yes.
And that's basically it.
Great, thank you.
No other questions, comments? No, thank you for the update. Mayor Little, you'd like to move?
I'd love to.
Yes. Mayor Hazelhurst, second. Thank you. All those who agree to receive the update, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Kia ora tātou. So now we have finished the meeting. We will head into workshops, so